Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Congressman Dusty Johnson. Congressman, thanks so much for coming back on.
Absolutely.
You recently reintroduced legislation that has to do with the Supreme Court. It's called Keep the Nine. Sounds pretty self-explanatory, but please tell us what's in it.
Since 1869, the Supreme Court has had 9 justices. Now, interestingly enough, the Constitution doesn't say that has to be the case. The Constitution is silent about it. And there have been some Supreme Court decisions over the course of the last 4 years that have frustrated some of the folks on the other side of the aisle. So Jerry Nadler, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, others have introduced legislation that would add 4 more justices to the Supreme Court. Now, they did that when Joe Biden was president. They wanted him to be able to add 4 more justices, packing the court like FDR tried to do back in the 1930s. My bill would make it very clear. It would put into the Constitution the fact that the number of justices shall be 9. We should not allow the size of the Supreme Court to ping pong up and down just based on the politics of the day.
A few years ago, Democrats reintroduced the Judiciary Act of 2023, which, as you said, would expand the court from 9 justices to 13. And Democrats as a whole have expressed mixed views to expanding the court, but at the time, Senator Ed Markey said this about the legislation. Quote, Republicans have hijacked the confirmation process and stolen the Supreme Court majority, all to appeal to far-right judicial activists who for years have wanted to wield the gavel to roll back fundamental rights. Each scandal uncovered, each norm broken, each precedent shattering ruling delivered is a reminder that we must restore justice and balance to the rogue, radical Supreme Court. It is time we expand the court. What's your response to that argument?
Oh my goodness, how many words. Clearly, Senator Markey is a politician that went on and on. Let me shorten down what he said. The court has done things I don't like, and so we get to pack the court so that I start to get decisions I like. It is nothing more than a disgusting and blatant power grab, and his statement makes that clear. People who care about the integrity of the court, people like former Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, former Justice Stephen Breyer, they said 9 is the right number. That's the right number for the court to be able to effectuate its work, and it's the right number to try to keep the court insulated from the kind of gross partisan politics that Senator Markey's statement makes it clear he wants to inject.
Well, going back to the timing of that came after, in President Trump's first term, as we remember, he nominated 3 Supreme Court justices, and that came after. So what you're saying is you think this is some sort of retaliation move expanding the court?
Let's keep in mind, nobody has alleged that Donald Trump did anything unconstitutional with his Supreme Court nominations. He made a nomination, the Senate advised in consent, voted to confirm, and those justices took their place on the court. So what exactly would the retaliation be about? The retaliation would be about the fact that folks are upset that right now we have a conservative majority on the court. Since they weren't able to change that majority on the court by getting Joe Biden elected to another term, they want to concoct ways to pack the court. And I just think it is transparent. It's a power grab. We have a better judiciary when it is isolated from these sort of political games, which is why my constitutional amendment is so incredibly important.
You want to keep it to 9, as the title indicates. You introduced this back in 2022. What was the reception then?
I haven't talked to a single Republican who doesn't like it, and I've talked to lots and lots of Democrats who acknowledge that this idea of packing the court is it's a really bad precedent. So let's assume that Ed Markey is right, and that is when courts start to make decisions that I don't like, that if I have the power to, I get to add more justices. So he takes it to 13. Well, then Republicans get the Senate and the House and the presidency, as we have now. Well, maybe 13's not enough. Maybe we could go 20, maybe 25. This sounds outlandish, but this sort of thing has happened in other countries. And that begins a process whereby the entire court becomes delegitimized. It leads to constitutional crisis. We should not go there. A number of Democrats acknowledge that, and they have told me that they want to work with me on my legislation, and I'm hopeful that we can get it done together.
That's really interesting. You're saying you think every Republican you've talked to is for this. Democrats have told you. Is it privately they told you that they are willing to work with you? Has any Democrat come out publicly and said, hey, this is something I could support, let's make it bipartisan?
Oh, there are a number of Democrats. I mean, again, Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Stephen Breyer, not politicians, of course, but even more importantly, Supreme Court justices. They said publicly on numerous occasions that 9 is the right number of justices. Aside from that, there are scores of Democratic activists, judicial experts, circuit court judges, district court judges who have all acknowledged that this is a really good idea.
So do you think you would have all of the votes then to get this passed?
To amend the Constitution, it's not as hard as you might think in Congress. The real challenging part comes with getting 3/4 of the states to vote to ratify the constitutional amendment. So it's a multi-year process. To me, I'm just focused on the idea that this is the right policy, it's the right conversation, and I'm hopeful we can get it done.
That's interesting because it's a multi-year process, but you're at step 1, reintroducing it this week. What's next for the bill?
Hopefully we can get it passed out of the House, then we can have the Senate pass it as well. Then it would be submitted to the states for their ratification. The state legislatures would be able to take it up on their own timeline. And once we got to 3/4 of them ratifying it, then it would be entered into the Constitution as, I forget, our 28th or 29th Amendment.
Congressman, per usual, I appreciate your conversations here. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.